On January 7, 1948, Captain Thomas Mantle of the Kentucky Air National Guard was asked by tower operator Sergeant Blackwell to change course and investigate an unusual sight in the sky. A short time later, Captain Mantle's Mustang would scream into a spiraling nosedive and hit the ground, killing its pilot. His death would spark national rumors about what had happened to him and why his plane crashed. Had he been shot down? Was it the Russians? What was the unusual sight that he was investigating? If you want to follow me on social media, you can follow me on Twitter at Peaked Interest, where the interest is spelt with a 1, or on Patreon at patreon.com/thatmovieshow. It would also be super helpful if you could press like and subscribe. Thanks, guys. At Godman Army Airfield in Fort Knox, a report came in from Highway Patrol stating that an unusual object was sighted near Madisonville. The object was simply described as a circular object just under 100 meters in diameter. At 1:15 p.m., Sergeant Quinton Blackwell read the reports and checked with Army Flight Service to see if there was any experimental aircraft running test flights in the area. Captain Hooper at Flight Test Operations responded by saying, "We have no experimental aircraft in that area. However, we do have a B-29 and an A-26 on photo missions in that area." Blackwell then scanned the skies to locate the object. Shortly after, he found it just south of Godman Airfield and contacted the control tower there to ask for verification of the object, so that he could rule out human or equipment error on his end. Private First Class Stanley Oliver located the object but initially dismissed it, thinking that he was imagining it. Blackwell ordered him to look again, and Oliver checked for a second time, and for a second time, he saw the object and confirmed this to Blackwell. Still unsatisfied, Blackwell called Lieutenant Orner and Captain Carter to the tower to look for and confirm sighting of the object. In Captain Carter's official statement, he states, "Lieutenant Orner pointed out the object to the southwest, which was easily discernible with the naked eye. The object appeared round and white, whiter than the clouds which passed in front of it." Captain Carter then called Colonel Hicks to the tower to observe it also. Like Captain Carter, he describes the object as round and white and easy to see with the naked eye. Using 8x magnification binoculars, he could also see that the object had a red glow from the bottom which sometimes switched to the top. The object remained stationary in the sky for approximately 1.5 hours, at which point it disappeared behind cloud cover. Though each officer described the same sized round object, some accounts offered slightly different details. In Lieutenant Orner's statement, he described it as a small white object which appeared stationary. He also couldn't tell if the object gave off its own light or if it was simply reflecting light, and described it through binoculars as partially appeared as a parachute does, with bright sun shining on top of the silk, but there also seemed to be some red light around the lower of it. Puzzled by what they were seeing, Sergeant Blackwell contacted a small flight of P-51 aircraft which were moving from one airbase to another in the area to investigate the object. One plane was ordered to continue on to its destination, while the other 3 were instructed to move to the object's location. Thomas Mantle was a captain in the United States Air Force. At the time of his death, he was 25 years old. He was a veteran of the Second World War, where he was involved in a campaign to take key bridges in Germany using air support known as Operation Market Garden. While flying over the Netherlands towing a vital glider, he was hit with heavy anti-aircraft fire which took out almost all of his rudder and elevator controls, which meant it was close to impossible to both change direction and altitude. Rather than release the glider early to regain control of the plane again by dropping weight, he continued on his mission and released the glider in the targeted area. Mantle then returned to base and somehow managed to land. Afterwards, engineers commented that the plane which Mantle had flown and landed was so badly damaged that it was unable to fly. For this, Mantle was given the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroic acts of bravery. Thomas Mantle was both a brave and outstanding pilot. The flight proceeded towards the object's last known location while steadily climbing. Flight leader Thomas Mantle then stated that he located the object directly ahead and above, whilst also saying that he was still climbing toward it. One of his wingmen then asked, "What the hell are we looking for?" making it clear that the other pilots had not yet located the object. At 15,000 feet, Mantle reported that the object was now directly ahead and above of him, moving at about half of his speed, which was about 180 miles per hour. He described it as metallic and of tremendous size. His wingmen advised at 15,000 feet that they were leveling out, while Mantle pursued it further, saying that he was trying to close in for a better look, and he would go to 20,000 feet, and if he could get no closer, he would abandon the chase. Shortly after, they lost radio contact with Captain Mantle. Mantle's wingmen then returned to Godman Airfield. When they returned, one of the pilots, NG-800, reported that he had seen something which he identified as looking like the reflection of sunlight on an airplane canopy. Shortly after making this statement, NG-800 then landed, refueled, and took off again to look for both the object and Captain Mantle. He searched 100 miles south of the object's position and climbed to 33,000 feet, but did not locate the object again. A short time later, Captain Mantle's aircraft was located crash-landed on a farm on Kentucky's border with Tennessee. Firemen pulled Mantle's body from the wreckage. His watch had stopped at 3:18 p.m., the time of his crash. Later in the evening, at 7:25 p.m., a VHF radio operator named Albert Pickering witnessed the object near Lockbourne. This time, the object changed, both description and behaviour. In Pickering's account, the object was still described as round or oval and larger than a C-47 military plane. He doesn't describe the object as white though. In his account, it's an amber colour and leaves what he describes as an exhaust trail 5 times the size of the object, also amber in colour. Unlike the previous accounts of the object, it didn't just hover in one place. Pickering reports that the object rotated on the spot for 3 full rotations before swiftly moving to another location and doing the same. Then, it dropped down to the floor, appearing to touch the floor, before shooting straight up into the sky at speeds of over 500 miles per hour, completely silently. Crash investigators concluded that Mantle must have passed out due to hypoxia, as his aircraft climbed altitude due to the fact that he did not have a working oxygen mask. The first explanation offered by the Air Force was that Mantle had been chasing Venus in the sky thinking it was a UFO. This was mostly because a few weeks earlier the Air Force had actually accidentally chased Venus, and that incident bore a lot of similarities with this one. A scientist called Dr. Hynek had originally supplied the Venus hypothesis due to the fact that Venus was in the same position as it had been for the previous chase. But he later revised this and said that he was incorrect because Venus would have just been a pinpoint of light, and not even close to the size of a reported object. He also said that Venus would not have been visible because it would not have been bright enough at that time. Dr. Hynek revised his hypothesis after realizing it couldn't be Venus and said that the most likely explanation for the strange object was a Skyhook balloon. Skyhook was a US Navy weather balloon project which, at that time, was classified, and so none of the people involved in the incident would have been aware of it. Skyhook could ascend to 100,000 feet, which mean that planes would cross paths with it. It was also of a metallic colour which reflected light and changed its shape depending on its altitude due to the types of gas inside the balloon. At lower altitudes it would have been a teardrop style shape, and at higher altitudes it would become more oval as the gases expanded. This made it a very likely candidate and explanation for Mantell's encounter. According to aeronautical historian Curtis Peebles, 2 separate observers in Madisonville and at Vanderbilt University had seen the object through telescopes and identified it as almost certainly a balloon with a basket attached. The observer at Vanderbilt even specified it as a teardrop shape with cables and basket attached. However, neither the US Air Force or the Navy has any record of Skyhook launches in this area on this date, and while the balloons were pretty big at 30 meters in diameter, they were not 100 meters in diameter, and that kind of size difference is quite difficult to confuse. The real problem with the balloon hypothesis is the account of Albert Pickering. Absolutely none of Pickering's account could be attributed to a balloon. The behaviour and appearance runs contrary to the story of a weather balloon. His account was also in the evening time, whereas the others were in the day, which may contribute to some of the changes in colour as the light changes in the evening. Personally speaking, I think the balloon hypothesis fits best and is the most likely. While the diameter is smaller, it is possible that Mantle and others were misjudging the size due to not having the background to compare size with. The shape of the balloon and the fact that it was both reflective and changed shape as its altitude increased also fit. I found it interesting that Lieutenant Orner initially said that it looked like a balloon and that it would be interesting to see how they labelled the object had they known about skyhook weather balloons at the time. It being a balloon would also explain how and why it appeared to hover for 1.5 hours. It would have been ascending, but so slowly that from a distance it would be imperceptible. While Captain Mantell's comments about the speed of the object would seem to rule out a weather balloon, I think we can attribute this to the lack of reference for relative motion. If Mantle is chasing the balloon straight up into the sky, as he reported, it would be very difficult for him to know how far away the object is, and thus not be able to tell what speed it's travelling. If he's misjudged the size of the object, then he would also have misjudged its distance from him, which would also lead him to misjudging its speed based on how quickly the object became closer. Optical illusions are both common and convincing in aviation. If the object was a classified balloon project, it would also explain the need for the incident to be covered up. That's exactly what military would do with any classified project. One thing that I thought was unusual is that none of the Air Force's personnel involved ever mentioned seeing the object on radar. Did they check? The reports and transcripts never mention looking at radar to see if the object was there or not, and radar was widely used by that time, and it is military protocol to establish objects seen visually on radar if possible, and at least one person said he thought it looked like a balloon. So why not check radar to see? There is also the small matter of Pickering's account. His account is drastically different to all the other accounts, which makes it an inconsistency. That's not to say that I'm dismissing it, it's just that the other accounts all they say the same thing at the same time, which makes them more reliable as they all confirm each other. Since Pickering saw the object in lower light, it's possible that could have affected what he saw. But I am going to concede that it's just really weird and I can't explain it with anything rational. Even today we don't have any aircraft which moves in silence, never mind ones which can accelerate instantly straight up. So if he did see what he says he saw, it's definitely not explainable by anything on Earth. So, that's my take. Do you agree? Did Captain Mantle chase a UFO? Or just a weather balloon? Let me know in the comments.